It wasn't until finding out that I was adopted that I realized, oh man, I had this big void over here. And then set about sort of trying to fill it. My name is Rick Allen. I'm 41 years old, born in Incheon, South Korea, to a Korean mother and a Black American father, but adopted and brought to the US. I was essentially a newborn. My older sister, Marja, had already been adopted, and she's 3.5 years older than I am, but we were essentially adopted at the same time. And then a little bit after that, we came back to the US.
So your sister was also at the same home that you
Yes.
were at?
Yes,
Okay, but she's not your biological sister?
that's right. We both independently done DNA tests, and we don't show up on each other's matches. So safe to assume that we're not genetically related. Mixed race kids in Korea, especially back then, right? They didn't have a lot of hopes for the future. And so, to be quite frank, I'm not sure how they came upon St. Vincent's. My dad is a retired Marine Corps colonel. My mother was, well, still is, a lawyer. My dad is Black. My mom is multiracial, Black, white, Native American, very fair skinned. But it was like I grew up with Black culture.
Mhm.
It's helpful in that I'm transracial adoptee, sort of, because of my Korean half, but I've never felt like a cultural void on the Black side of me.
Yeah, that was actually something I was curious to ask you about, because like when we've heard some stories of Korean adoptees who are full Korean being raised primarily by white families, there's a lot of like disconnect when it comes to also racial identity. But in your case, at least your Black side, you
Yeah.
would be able to connect a little bit more
Yeah.
growing up.
But yeah, it wasn't until finding out that I was adopted that I realized, oh man, I had this big void over here. And then set about sort of trying to fill it.
안녕하세요. Hello everyone, it's Rick again, and welcome back to Hidden Hangugin. Today I'm bringing you my adoption story. I know quite a bit about this because of a 22-page first-person narrative written by my father in pursuit of my biological parents.
So growing up, how did you view yourself?
I mean, I thought for so long that both Marja and I were, we all came from the same place. We had a younger sister, and I was old enough to remember my mother being pregnant with her. And so I just thought, oh, we're like a normal Black family who do normal Black family things. And that was that. And it sort of got turned upside down a little bit when I found out of it being adopted, because I also found out Marja was adopted. And I realized that I was like, things were just different. And I mean, Marja and I are similar in a lot of ways genetically and appearance. And so, yeah, I mean, especially to see us all together, it's like, well, they look like they're related, so they must be all together. It's not like with a lot of Korean adoptees being raised, they're transracial adoptees, where it's quite obvious that there's no chance that they're genetically related to their parents.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's kind of curious in your case. Also growing up without, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe not such a strong sense of biracial identity either, right? Because you wouldn't assume
Right.
that you have
Yeah.
any Korean background.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought, okay, well, I must have some percentage of white in me, and like a smaller percentage of Native American, and the rest was Black, and that's what I thought. And then, found out at 16 I was adopted, and then a couple of years ago did a DNA test, and like my 50% Korean is 100% Korean. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, but I never had any reason to believe that was the case. My parents were separated and were going through divorce. So it was 96 or 97, and we had one of those enormous old multi-function office machines that like scanned and copied and printed and did everything very, very slow. And my mother had given me like a stack of papers to put in there to scan so she could have it like a PDF or whatever. And so I turned it over to make sure it's right side up, and in the middle of the page, there's a paragraph that began like, of the 3 children, 2 adopted and 1 natural, and it listed us. And having remembered her being pregnant with Kai, I knew instantly. But I didn't tell her that I knew. I kept that to myself, and like I told all my friends, and I sort of dealt with it on my own. It was months probably that went by before I let her know that I knew. And so I sort of came to grips with it on my own. And I told Marja just yesterday that I knew that she could keep a secret because she's known her whole life, but that she and I were adopted both, but never told me because she was not allowed.
Whoa.
And so, and at the time she was in New York and had already met her birth mother. Like I dealt with it on my own and had questions for my parents since, but I think the way it happened was unusual and perhaps not great in the long run, but I think that for helping me deal with it, it was good.
Maybe at that moment.
Yeah.
I can't believe your sister knew though. Like she didn't tell you. That must have been hard on her as well.
Yeah, and there weren't situations that arose where it would have made sense for her to just blurt it out, you know?
Yeah.
But she was on her own journey and it was successful in finding her mom. And it's crazy that she has, now she has like an existing relationship with her and she's fortunate in that. There's still fingers crossed that at some point I can find my birth mother, but so far nothing. And it's just the nature of being an adoptee, and family search is not always fruitful. And we cling on to success stories hoping that they can be ours too, but realistically the odds are against you.
Did you know at that point when you saw the paper that you were also mixed Korean? Was that on the paper as well?
No, and that's something I found out a little bit later on. It wasn't until I talked to my mother about it. I didn't really know what to do with that because you live your whole life one way and then suddenly you realize, oh man, there's this whole other part of you. And it actually sort of lay dormant for I'd say another 8 years until I really started experiencing. I had a friend who was like, wait, what do you mean you've never eaten Korean food before? And took me to a restaurant in Springfield so I could have Korean food for the first time. And then from there, things have sort of slowly blossomed into where I am now. I feel like I missed out a little bit on that aspect of things. And I felt like sometimes that I'm sort of excluding over the past few years the black half of me, but it's not that it's not there. It's I don't feel that I need to fill that pot anymore. And so this half is what's sort of the priority.
Maybe this is your parents' story and maybe you can't answer it, but do you know why your parents didn't want to let you know? Not even just being adopted, but also being mixed Korean and having this whole culture also behind you. So
they were supposed to tell me together. And then they split. But before that, they had, a 16-year window. And I think that when at some point the right time just never comes. And then, I got older and then it becomes, all right, well, why didn't you do this before? Maybe I wouldn't be so quickly rushing through, trying to take in as much as I can over the past few years. I don't blame them or anything for not having told me. I just wish that it happened sooner.
For the first half of your life, up to that point, Korea wasn't even on the radar. It wasn't even in a country of importance, I'm assuming. And then suddenly, you're like, oh, I am from Korea, right?
Yeah.
So how did you adjust your mind to understand that and then actually be in Korea?
It was weird in a way because to see me on the street, no one would expect that I'm gonna speak Korean. And so I'm treated like an average Westerner. But I felt comfortable all the time, and everybody was nice and accommodating. I just sort of basked in it all because I at the time I didn't know when I was going to come back, and now we're going back at the end of the month.
Was it difficult, or has it been difficult grappling in terms of course, in terms of adoptee identity and then biracial identity?
I'm different from a lot of half Koreans raised by Korean parents. or a Korean parent, and different from Korean adoptees in that I don't look really Korean. And existing in that middle ground is strange because I feel like I'm missing out on both sides in a way, especially over the past few years with like Black Lives Matter protests and then anti-Asian sentiment with COVID. Both sides feel like the walls are closing in. that part has been difficult. It's caused me to sort of realize that racism doesn't necessarily see the half of me. They see like the whole of you. Right? That's just something that you have to live with when you're one or the other or both. With my identity, I realized that I am what and who I choose to be, regardless of what others think. When I started my YouTube channel, I got a few comments from people who were just like, really Korean, you don't speak the language, and you're like half Black, and suggestions that I should like explore my Black half. And I mean, first of all, I spent a long time doing that, but also like, who are you to decide what I am and what I should explore, what part of my identity I should focus on. And so I came to the conclusion that like, this is I am who I decide I want to be.
So you've decided then it is very important to learn more about Korean culture and be part of it. And actually, you're going to assimilate at some point, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to Korea.
My wife's job is taking us there. We'll be there for 3 years or 4 years. I could not be more excited. I just want like the food and the eating and drinking experience. But I'm also excited that like our daughter is going to learn Korean, and that's exciting because she's half white and a quarter Black and a quarter Korean, and I want her to be able to have like all of her cultures in one.
Can I ask you then, because you hadn't alluded to it earlier yet, but do you plan on seeking out your biological mother while you're in Korea?
So I found my biological father, and I asked him, like I showed him pictures of her because I do have those, and he doesn't remember her. And I've gone through various organizations in Korea, like official channels, how you're supposed to do it. And with the information we have, they haven't been able to find her. I'm coming to the realization that perhaps she didn't give all of, like she maybe falsified her name or some part of her like ID number, right? And those are the two things that you need if you're gonna try to find somebody. So once, I'm not sure if she's in Korea, my adoptive father found her shortly after my adoption and asked her a bunch of questions. I have a 20-page document about his search. She says in there that she was seeing someone who I assume was an American because there was discussion about her eventually moving to the US. So I don't know if she's in Korea, in the US. I don't know if she's alive. It's a half 100 possible outcomes. In the meantime, it's Google and looking for little carrots of information in like 23andMe and Ancestry to try to find something. Realistically speaking, I know the odds are long. And so I try not to be too disappointed if I don't come up with something.
When you go to Korea, what is something that you are expecting or hoping?
Well, what I'm hoping for is just like acceptance. Not just necessarily like as a Korean, like a full-blooded Korean, but just like for me, for who I am. I think my hope is that people will meet me and then get to know me, and then that'll be enough. But yeah, once it becomes like our lives there and we're established and like all our stuff gets there and we're all unpacked and like the house is a home, like then what's it gonna be like? And I have no idea.
How do you plan on, well, with you and Lisa, how do you plan on raising Claire in terms of her cultural identity? And I know that's a very big and broad question. I'm not expecting you to necessarily, have the answer, but I mean, surely I'm sure that you guys have discussed it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of aspects to this. Like we've already done Baekhyun and Doljanchi for her. I want her to to sort of have exposure to a lot of our varying cultures and allow her to sort of choose what she does and doesn't want. I want Claire to understand and to learn about it and then choose if this is something that she wants. And I think, I mean, obviously this is something that will happen in, you know, a few years down the line when she's making when she's informed enough to make choices, but I want her to be able to make those choices. I don't want to force her to observe one thing or another. You only have room for so much inside you, I think. And so her to choose what those things are. But I do want her to be like exposed to it all so that she can make those choices. I don't think that I am defined by being adopted, being half Black, being half Korean, but those are all things that I am. And so, you know, there's a stigma to adoption. And like one of the reasons that it's supposed that my biological mother wasn't necessarily forthright in providing her own personal information is because she was like, I was out of wedlock, I was multiracial. She didn't want like that sort of following her around. And that's the impression I got from my dad having talked with her. Like, I know this stigma exists and I don't want that to be a thing that like stops people from getting to know me. I want people to think, okay, well, all these things are there, but you know, it's about getting to know someone beyond that. And so, you know, fingers crossed.